Hello, everyone. Happy Shochu'sday. This is number 70 in the epic journey of the Wednesday morning in Japan, Tuesday evening in North America, which is honestly our target because I know it's 2 a.m. or something in London right now. But anyways, happy Shochu'sday. And welcome back
Cheers to
to
that.
cheers, the normal version of this whole show, meaning both Steven and I are in Japan, which is basically the way that it started and the way that we feel most comfortable doing it. No background noise, no traffic immediately behind us, no threat of being mauled by a bus. And so, welcome back to reality. How you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing well. I'm very glad to be back on this side of the screen. It was very off-putting last week to be on your side of the screen when I was talking with Maya. I much prefer this corner of the screen. So
Which side of the screen are you on when you're looking at it?
when I'm looking at it, I am on the left side.
Same for me.
Stage left.
Well, that would okay. Gotcha.
Right. You're it's hard to explain. You're on the left in front of me, so I feel like I'm on the left facing the audience.
Gotcha. Yeah. On my screen, I'm on the left, and then you're directly under the camera, which is probably the best way to do it.
Which I have you under the camera too. Is it
Yeah.
the tips of the trade? So I'm not looking at I know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So any news on your end? Anything exciting?
I'm happy to be back to work. I've got lots of grading to do and that sort of thing. But it's good to be back in routine, and I'm really glad fall is here. Although it's going to be 31 degrees Celsius today in Fukuoka, which is what 92.
Yeah. Over 90.
Yep.
Yep.
So it felt like
September
fall
29th.
for about a week. Yeah. But I guess that's what happens living down south. We can have some Indian summers, I guess. Now and again.
Yeah. It won't be a straight path to winter. That's for damn sure.
No.
Well, cool. Yeah, we're both back. I'm in quarantine now. So
in a very safe place.
that's right. Yeah, I mean it's a great place to be quarantined in. But I'm not really allowed to leave my home until
Couldn't
the 8th of October.
Not quarantining at home though. Like 2 weeks in a hotel, I would have gone stir crazy.
Evan did that, and he did just about go
damage, isn't he?
I think it took a couple of years out of him.
Yeah,
it wasn't. I don't think it was that pleasant. So yeah, I'm very fortunate. Mostly, it's just geographically not restricted. I had to pay a 27,000 private hire cab fee to get home. 27,000, like $250 maybe, which is enough. Not something you want to do every day, but I do have the luxury of quarantining at home rather than paying what would have been a lot more for 14 days in a hotel, as you said, and with no really easy way to get out early. They don't really make it. They do. I read that there's a way to take a PCR test on the 11th day or something to shortchange it by a couple of days. I don't know why they don't do it sooner.
Yeah,
but it's as you can imagine, it's a Japanese system of red tape. There's a ton of administrivia, and it's almost like it's worth it just to stay here an extra 3 days to not even have to deal with that.
I mean, for me, the silver lining was being able to stay home and not going right back to work while I'm jet lagged. And, I was actually quite productive being able to sit in my apartment and not worry about my commute, not worry about, running errands or anything else. But I guess I'm an optimist. So I put the positive spin on it rather than being like, I really want to go to, wherever. Also, we're in lockdown, so there wasn't really any place to go.
Lockdown. Yeah.
Well, nothing's open after 8. So.
Sure. Yeah, that's the Japan version of lockdown. It's not required either, right? It's voluntary.
But even
don't
before
sell
8,
alcohol.
Before 8, no booze. Right? So
Yeah.
basically no booze in.
But are people in Fukuoka following that? Because in Tokyo they're not. If you're not on the first floor, if you're on the second floor or a B1, people are serving alcohol.
I haven't really explored that too much. I know a place they shall remain nameless. They do okay.
Yep.
Yep.
I don't know why you would stay closed through all of this when they're having the Olympics and stuff, and it's just there's no rhyme or reason. But anyway, that's not what this show is about.
Yeah, case counts way down in Fukuoka too, so I feel a little better now.
Yep.
So, anyway.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
Okay. Yeah. Whiskey service styles, which to whiskey purists probably sounds sacrilegious, but we get more into the history of whiskey service in Japan rather than what I think. I think purists tend to think whiskey should be consumed straight, maybe with a few drops of water. That's kind of the modern thinking, right? When you're on these whiskey discussion boards and all that sort of thing, people are just pretty. They're not called discussion boards anymore. They're called Facebook groups, I think. But when you're having these conversations, often people are drinking things straight, neat, that sort of thing, and that's not how whiskey's typically been consumed in Japan. In fact, back in the 60s or so, there was a really popular chain of bars called Tori's Bars, which you can guess from the name where they were from, Suntory, shortened to Tori. There's a picture of one there. And so Tori's Bars were basically English-style pubs or British-style pubs in Japan that served whiskey, heavily diluted, to replace beer. Mm-hmm. And there were over 1,000 of these in Japan back in their heyday. And so there's all sorts of ways that you can drink whiskey. Some of them are not popular outside of Japan.
Right.
Obviously, the highball is gaining traction. Suntory's had a lot to do with that. We've put a lot of resources into the highball market. Even with like Jim Beam highballs that were being advertised at a baseball game I was watching recently. There was a big advertisement behind home plate.
Sure, those. Yeah, those have been on TV for a long time, for several years now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're in your book, you go into a lot of detail about the history of this as well, which may be another good reference for people.
I do talk about that. You can see there, actually, that last picture was, I'd never actually had a half up, or a twice up, is it? I think.
Well, there's two different ways. Yeah, there's a half and a twice.
Yeah, sorry, the twice. I'd never had a twice up before. So I made one for myself, 50-50 water and whiskey, and it was really nice. It really brought out a lot of the nice flavors of the whiskey, and I actually think that's probably better for a premium whiskey to cut it 50-50 with water, because that's going to have a lot of interesting notes. It's not like a young grain distillate that's got some caramel coloring in it, like a mass market whiskey. It actually is a really nice way to drink a premium whiskey, and I may start doing that more with some of my other whiskeys just to see how they express.
Yeah, and as we've discussed a million times before, a lot of the drinks made in Japan are constructed with the idea in mind that the end user is going to dilute them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think whiskey's probably a lot of whiskey makers think that as well. Would you agree with that?
Well, a whiskey maker, certainly. I mean, that's how whiskeys are evaluated.
Whiskey maker. Sorry, did I say whiskey drinker? Whiskey maker, yeah.
Yeah, I think you said maker.
Oh, okay.
I need more coffee, honestly.
Well, I guess the reason why I'm showing this again, sorry to keep on robbing the screen, but I just want to make people aware of the fact that we do have a website called japandistilled.com. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the best place if you're into podcasts, it's the best place to check in and get the content, just because of the show notes, which are detailed, have the images that you saw. One of those images was a picture that Stephen, did you take that in Wisconsin, or you got that from somebody else?
Oh, no, I unfortunately, I tend to borrow a lot of photos that I find around the internets. I probably should stop doing that, but
I wasn't sure if you had made it up that far on your most recent trip.
I did not.
But it's a good indication of exactly how pervasive this whole whiskey highball from a gun, from a beverage gun, is becoming. It really is not from a beverage gun. It's actually from a draft tower. But it is really, really common. And again, please, if you're interested in listening to our podcast, I really would stress that the website japandistilled.com is a great way to consume that content and to interact with the content, leave comments, and we can start a discussion there. And as always, you can reach out to us directly.
I think the whiskey highball might be a perfect encapsulation of the dichotomy that is Japan. And I come across this over and over and over again, where when you go into a proper Japanese bar, classic bartender in the tuxedo, making perfect cocktails every time, and you ask him for a highball, it'll take him 6 or 7 minutes to prepare the drink, right? It's a labor of love to make sure the glass is chilled appropriately, any milk that's gotten from the ice as he's building the drink is drained off before any of the things you're going to drink are poured into that glass. It's a very long process, which is pretty amazing to watch, but of course you have to be patient to wait six minutes for a 2-part drink, but they can be absolutely beautiful. So that is sort of the craftsmanship of Japan, right? That's the shokunin spirit, right? The singular attention to craft. On the opposite end, you have whiskey highball machines.
Right.
Right. That's the automation of everything in Japan. That's the technological advances that, seem to be endless coming out of this country. So it's a really fun dichotomy right there in the whiskey highball.
Yeah. Those machines are everywhere now.
They are. Cool.
And if you need to knock a bunch of them back, then you go to a place where they have the machine. And if you want to, if you're going for cocktails, then you go to a proper bar, a cocktail bar.
Yeah, that's right. And what are those costs now? Like out of the machine, they're like some izakayas, it's like less than $4.
Yeah, they're dirt cheap. I mean, there's probably very little whiskey in them, but I don't know. Yeah, they're satisfying. They're refreshing, and they are very crushable, which is, I guess, by design. Sure. Cool. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to. I want another quick announcement. I'm going to take the podcast off here, and you'll see the ticker tape at the bottom. I just want to give a shout out to some of our favorite people in California, if not the entire United States. The good, lovely folks at Umami Mart, who are continuing to put out really educational content and enjoyable experiences for the people within their orbit, and they have their sake gumi and they have their shochu gumi, and they have an event coming up what will be tonight for us, or it would be, sorry, that's not true. It'll actually be tomorrow morning in Japan, but it'll be the early evening of the 29th in California, and this is a Zoom event that is going to involve a toji from Akita Prefecture, who will be talking about their Daiginjo sake and the Kastori Shochu that is made from the lees of that sake. So I'm gonna again steal the screen because I'm getting good at this now, and I'm gonna show you where you can go to find more information about this. You want to head to the Umami Mart website, and the event again, which is going to be called Sake and Shochu. Why make both? It's a Zoom tasting with Akita Seishu Brewery Toji. And it'll be a very, very good way to learn more about the differences between these drinks, the relationship between what is known as Kastori Shochu and sake, the sake lees that it's made from. How does that process work? And what's the point of doing both? If you're a sake maker, why would you make shochu as well? And the way that this works, and you can see, the two drinks that they're going to focus on are this seiden, which is a milled to 50 or polished to 50% daiginjo. I believe it's a junmai sake, junmai daiginjo seishu sake. And then they are also going to focus on this namahage shochu, which is a kastori honkaku shochu, also made up in Akita at the same brewery. And the way that this works, and if you're in California, or if you're in Oakland, then you can make this happen as soon as they're open tomorrow. Is go over there, buy the 2 bottles, and you'll be allowed to. You'll get the Zoom link, and you'll be able to join in for that. What I'm sure is going to be a very interesting tasting.
That should be. Yeah, that sounds fun.
And they do this. They do this seasonally.
Yeah, I mean, sign up for their newsletter if you haven't already. They've got, I think, really good information about all kinds of things. And they do have not just drinks, but all sorts of barware and that sort of thing. Really,
They
really
have these
nice
they have these
assortment.
coffee cups that when I was there last month, I love the shape of them, and I can't remember the damn name. You'll have to go to the Umami Mart website and look for them, but they're just the perfect shape and the perfect weight. And every time I see them, I kind of lust for them. And so I bought a whole fleet of them and brought them to my mother's birthday and just handed them out like candy. And they make everybody very happy. Everyone who receives one of those loves the design, and they love the weight, and they love the shape, and they're just
Nice.
perfect. Yeah.
Very nice. Cool. You are getting very good at stealing the screen, but what you've done now is you put us into letterbox. Usually it's our whole heads. Just might be
What do
easier
you
for
mean?
people on
Oh, that's it. Okay, so let's
It
go.
looks like I
Okay,
can
so it
actually
still has
change
me
that.
in the thing. Oh yeah,
There
we
we
need
go.
to go to the expanded version. I can put us in letterbox like that. I can do. Oh, okay, I see. I didn't realize that it defaulted back to that when on my screen it was still showing that the kidnap section was still there, the one
Gotcha.
that was selected, which is weird. Okay, what's next?
All right.
Let's move on
Right.
to booze news.
Yeah, this is a big one. It was announced very recently, I think last week, that the Japanese tax office has proposed removing the color restrictions from shochu and Aomori, which, as we've talked about over and over and over again, both on the podcast and on this live stream, it's always just been essentially a handicap for the industry, not being able to play around with barrel aging. And then when you do barrel age, you've got to filter it to take out the color in order to sell it as shochu. Right? You got to get the color down below a certain threshold, and that color
Right.
is very, very light.
It is really ridiculously light.
Do you have
I've got a mellowed kozuru. I don't know if this does it justice. This is made by our good friends at Komasa Jozo.
Yeah, and you can see this is Nankai
That's
Gold.
even almost even lighter, isn't it? I don't know.
That's-
The camera
right.
does weird things.
Sure.
Lighting too.
I also have consumed more of this. This has been my evening sipper recently. But I even wore a white shirt to make sure that you'd be able to see the color difference. But you compare that to even a
Oh
relatively,
yeah, that takes a lot of white paper behind it. Takes all the color out of it.
and then I mean next to it is a very light Irish whiskey, right?
Yeah, and it's double the
Yep.
hue.
That might
Almost.
still be too dark.
Check this out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, compared to Takamine, that's going to be a huge
Yeah,
difference,
just
right?
ridiculous.
Yeah. So the exciting part about this is the color restrictions are now on the table to be eliminated as of the start of the new fiscal year, which will be April 1st, 2022. I think everyone is still wrapping their heads around what this means, and the rules themselves haven't yet been written. It's only been proposed that the color restriction be eliminated. But what it sounds like in talking to some of the shochu makers in the industry, it sounds like it's a formality. When the tax office proposes something like this, if they see an opportunity to increase tax revenue through increased sales and interest in a category, they're going to go ahead and do it. So it sounds to me like this is a done deal. And as of April, shochu makers will be able to sell their shochu and Aomori makers, obviously, as darker distillate,
Mm-hmm.
which is really exciting. I mean, that for one thing, it's going to release a lot of product that's been languishing, right? We've seen so many casks in distilleries from distillers who don't even have barrel aged products in market, and part of that is I think they just don't know what to do with it. Right?
They might not even have a spirits license or anything, right? They
Mhm,
can't legally release it, maybe.
Yeah, so that's not exactly. So that's what some of the makers have done to get around it. Is if they have a spirits license, they can sell that product under a spirits license, right?
Yeah,
But
I mean that's
a lot of shochu makers don't have spirits
Yeah.
licenses.
right.
It's all chicanery.
It's so
and,
dumb. The whole
arcane
thing is
rules.
weird.
and so
Yeah.
the tax office is now proposing to eliminate this. So the original reason for the hue restrictions, actually, this is a little bit of history geekery, was to protect or to differentiate shochu and protect essentially imported whiskey. This was back when they negotiated, because the UK basically submitted a complaint to the
Well, it was
WTO.
it was the European community. It was a whole bunch of different
Okay,
countries,
right.
but
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So they basically but it was largely, I think, driven by the UK with
Oh,
the
sure,
Scotch
sure, sure.
makers, right?
Yeah.
So basically complaining that Japan had unfair domestic tax rules that made shochu and domestically produced whiskey much cheaper than imported whiskey. Now, imported products are always likely to be more expensive because of the cost of transportation, international transportation, but the price differences were enormous. And then, so the negotiated settlement was harmonize the tax rates, and then in order not to, as I understand it, if I remember correctly, in order not to tax shochu at the same rate as whiskey, because they wanted to protect their native spirit, they put in this color restriction. Right. So basically, that way nobody would mistake shochu for whiskey, and the darker color was considered more premium, I guess, was sort of the idea. It was basically just a concession. We don't actually
Oh yeah,
know
it
how
was
decisions were made.
completely and 100% to get the European communities and the United States who had piled on off of Japan's back. So it was completely just like whoa, because the argument that was being made, which was completely false, was that shochu was a competitive product to whiskey, which was, and we knew then and we know now even better that no, it's not. Shochu drinkers down in Kyushu are not choosing that over whiskey. It's not an either or proposition, but they had already attacked. The European communities were going after all sorts of unfair trade practices, and to be fair, yes, taxation was higher on the imported products, but it wasn't to. I don't know if it was necessarily to protect shochu. I don't think the central government even knew what shochu was back in the 1990s. No, so the government was just like, whoa, uncle, what do we do to make this go away? And they just put up a bunch of these silly regulations to make sure that, and then you're right, and then they gradually over time they harmonized the taxation, and now we're at a place where all of these spirits makers who have been around for centuries are completely handcuffed. They can't. They're not allowed to be creative, purely to assuage the concerns of very, very large interests overseas. So now those interests have slowly creeped into Japan, and now those are Japan's interests too, as I believe you discussed last week with Maya Ailey. But it was this whole tax regime was partly a reaction to litigation.
Yeah, and if you go to the WTO website and just search Japan and shochu as keywords, you can actually find the original filings and all of it.
It's really interesting to read.
All those
through.
PDFs exist.
Yeah.
And I think this was back in the 90s. Is that when all this was happening?
That's right.
It was a long process. I mean, it took years and years for them to settle it. And the losers were the shochu makers. And I think you're right. The central government didn't have any concern for them. So it was... when I said that protect the shochu makers, it was a lower tax rate for shochu. That was what I was referring to.
Sure.
Because if you raise the price of shochu through tax, you would be killing domestic demand, because people are very price sensitive here.
Especially back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not before the bubble burst. I mean, back in the early 90s, they were happy to pay whatever it cost because of just that was a different lifestyle back then. But
but so what I'm actually really excited about is what this means going forward. Because I think we've been seeing, even without these restrictions lifted, we've been seeing incredible innovation among producers based on yeast strain, aging methods, filtration. Even packaging is just getting so much more creative, and you've just got a lot of innovation in the industry right now. And I think that lifting these color restrictions is going to change that again in probably unanticipated ways, and probably in ways that makers themselves haven't even thought of.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're going to see some really cool products coming out in the next, 3, 5, 10 years. I mean, I don't know how long the barrel aging is going to be done. The product Kana, for example, only spends a year in oak. There's no requirement for how long you keep shochu in a barrel, except that you couldn't allow it to get too dark.
Right.
And I think how some of the makers got around that is they use tired casks, right? So it's not imparting as much color. But third fills, fourth fills, something like that. Who knows? I think, and there's not really, for a lot of the makers until now, there really hasn't been much of a focus on barrel management because it's always been an afterthought.
Yeah.
But now maybe that's going to change. Maybe we'll see some of the
hopefully
other.
it will.
Yeah, we know our
Yeah,
our
do you
friends
think?
at Toyonaga, for example, have done a little bit of barrel aging release,
Yeah.
and I think they're interested. So I'm not curious if they'll invest more in that going forward.
It's a very interesting question. I mean, it's a question of space.
Mhm.
It's a question of procuring decent casks, and I don't like I. Hats off to people who just trust these brokers of casks, these used casks, to like, oh yeah, it's a sherry cask. What? Like, how do you verify all of this? I don't know how you do that. So hats off to them for that level of faith in the process. Knowing how to manage the cask, which we have seen is not simple. And then also the investment of, as we've discussed a million times before, they have to pay they basically prepay the liquor tax as soon as this the spirit comes off the still.
Yep.
And to wait however many years, who can absorb that cost? That's another thing. So
That's a great point.
it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. I mean, a lot of these ancient barrels that are out there are just like sunk costs. I think it was pretty shady accounting. They wrote off they wrote it off as a loss. I don't know how they account for that, but
Yeah.
it's weird. It's very interesting though. The possibilities have just increased 2 or 3-fold. So I'm excited to see what happens. And I just think stop picking on the shochu makers and the Aomori makers, for crying out loud.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess but on the other hand, I'm wondering. I mean, this will be to the benefit of the shochu industry. I don't think there's any doubt. But the motivation behind it is sort of still up for grabs, I think. Like,
The motivation behind it, that's a good question. What is driving this?
Yeah.
Are there
I mean,
that many shochu makers like pleading for the ability to age longer in oak? I'm not sure.
Right. And
Where could that be coming from?
Yeah, I mean, just that this follows so close on the heels of the new labeling
The
standards
whiskey
for
regulations.
whiskey. And as we know, there are shochu makers barreling shochu and selling it overseas as rice whiskey, right? So it could be almost an effort to say, look, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just sell it as shochu, right? I'm almost wondering if there wasn't some influence coming from the big whiskey makers to say, oh, this is another avenue. If we open up the domestic market, we have less competition overseas or something like that.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe is it a fairness thing, just because all of these labeling regulations, which are not law, they're not tax law. Like, all of these things are just guidelines for the whiskey industry, and shochu and Aomori have legit laws. There are you shall not pass this line, and they're everywhere. And that ensures quality in the shochu and Aomori industry. But why is it that the whiskey industry is always handled with kid gloves, and the shochu, the domestic spirits, the indigenous spirits industry is like, no, this is how it works, and that's how it does not work. Well, what's the deal here? I wonder, could it be an egalitarian play? I wonder. I don't know. Probably not. What am I talking about?
Suddenly you're the optimist. What's going on here? I'm confused.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think about it from a number of different directions, but
Sure. No, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, and I think we'll have more clarity once the regulation is actually written, right, as to what the motivation was. But because right now it's basically a paragraph or two in a much longer document around tax reforms, which, if you want to read about that on Nomunication on Whiskey Richard's site, he has, in his news section, he has an article about this, very, very brief. But it should give you some sense of what. And
he links to the Japanese PDF if you want to read it. So
he does.
Yeah. So that's a pretty significant booze news. I think we've had 2 of them in a row now. One last week and one this week, right?
Yeah. We're becoming a news program. Do we need to
I know.
the name of the show?
What the hell is going on?
Show Newsday. Is that
Ooh, nice play. There you go. Bum. So okay, let's move. What else? Is there any other booze news? Not. Is there anything
I don't
else
think
important going
I
on?
didn't
Not
see
so
any
much.
huge announcements today. I think it was the Umami Mart event, the new proposed standard or the new proposed tax change.
Yep.
And
And and for those of you who are wondering about the whole reference to, we haven't specifically referenced it today, but the talk of last week's episode, which Maya was on, and talking about the Kanosuke, the in Diageo, who, if you don't know, just Google it, Diageo. Diageo has gotten into the Japanese whiskey game by grabbing a minority chunk of Kanosuke, one of the new shining stars of the whiskey industry, domestic whiskey industry here in Japan, and probably one of the better ones growing out of Kyushu right now. So go back and watch episode number 69, which was last week. That's Stephen and Maya holding court in that one.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a good way to get your head around some of the big things that are happening in the spirits industry in Japan right now.
viewer beware, I think we went right at an hour, maybe even a little over. So
Okay,
we
you
had a
may
lot
need
say.
to split it in half, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, how about
Well-
newly opened?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. And it's
Go
funny
for it.
because you talked about the Umami Mart event with the Akita Sake plus Hastori, and
Uh-huh.
I actually opened a this is a Kastori
Huh.
from as I understood it. So I got this entire explanation from the shop owner in Japanese, but it's called basically E-type DGJ 30 Kiss. So 30 is the ABV. It's a 30% alcohol Kastori Shochu. And this
Okay.
apparently, as I understand it, if I could follow his story correctly, so this is called Iwaki Kotobuki. Apparently is the name of the brewery. Now they were based in, I think what ended up happening is a couple of the breweries that were wiped out in Fukushima, and apparently quite a few of the Kurobito lost their lives.
Yep.
The brewery staff, their brands were revived in another prefecture. Basically, I couldn't follow the entire story, and we should probably research this and fill it out. Fill in for people on a future episode, but essentially this is the Kastori Shochu being made from the lees of the sake, the first sake that they made to commemorate those.
I see.
The old breweries that were destroyed. And
Gotcha.
I really should have a lot more information about this to tell you about it, but I just opened it last night. It's my newly opened. Maybe we'll do an episode about it in the future.
How is it?
It's really, really nice. It's I think they hit the sweet spot on the ABV. I'm guessing the E refers to the yeast, maybe. Doesn't that seem like a
Probably the
yeast
yeast
sort of
strain.
thing?
Yeah.
It's a Daiginjo.
DGJ is Daiginjo, probably.
Yeah, E-type. And E-type is the old Jaguars too. That's pretty.
Nice.
I like the packaging too. But it's Daiginjo Sakekasu Shochu, and I really like the way it drinks. I was drinking on the rocks last night, and they say straight or rocks is what's recommended. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And as you know, I'm a fan of Kastori Shochu, so it's nice to find another one.
It is.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it is for me. Kastori Shochu. I think I've found so many more that are really approachable over the last 2 years, as I've been at home almost the entire time, and I've had stuff either sent to me or I ordered it. I was like, oh, okay, there's some obscure ones out there. They are obscure, and they're not. They can't make a lot of it. But when you find a good one, you're like, oh, this is really good. And then when you find a weird one, you're like, oh, you didn't really care about this at all, did you, when you made it? Yeah. So there's basically two camps there, I think.
That's completely fair. And I've been a fan for a while, as you know, so it's always fun to find a new one. Now, I actually found a new liquor store in Fukuoka, which is where I discovered this, and they actually basically, I guess, are doing everything they can to support this project. So they have like an entire cooler case full of all the sake expressions that have been coming out of this brewery since they started production. Plus, they had the shochu, and I've never seen any of the brands in Fukuoka before. So I'll definitely be back at the shop and
That's
try
fun.
the sake as well. Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
So that's,
For me,
I'm
the
sorry.
recently opened
Yep.
is also rice based. It's a 25%. I just had it in the back for a long time. 25% Shimauta, which is an Aomori made by Masahiro Shuzo, and it's really light, and it's pretty easy. I mean, when I say light, it's not the aromas are really fruity, which I think is a lot of fun, and it's one of those starter Aomori. I believe this 25% makes it to the States as is, if not 24, and it just has a really good aroma that I think is best on the rocks or even straight, just to really enjoy it. And it's one of those instances where a maker dips below the 30% mark and basically they hit it pretty well. It still has tons of aroma, but they smooth it out a little bit so that you could drink it neat. You can have it on the rocks really easily. And yeah, we're seeing right now people remarking that they've seen it before, at least on from YouTube right now. And yeah, there is not much Aomori available in the States right now, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, and hopefully that will change very, very, very soon. I don't know if whether or not we have some inside information. You can make your own guesses about that, but it's good.
Yeah, we know there's an Aomori importer in Los Angeles, our friend Hiro Tome, and we had several conversations with him trying to figure out how to get him distribution to the East Coast, because right now he's only selling in a couple states, and he's got some really, really good stuff in his portfolio. And of course, honkaku spirits will have Aomori in the future, if our Instagram profile is to be believed. We're working on it.
We definitely will.
Yeah, Shimuta is a good one. I agree with you. It's got that fruit. It's, I guess, a ippanshu, right? So basically,
it is
an unaged Aomori.
Very young.
And I've really seen that predominantly on the West Coast. Occasionally, bottles will end up on the East Coast, but I think it probably is 24%. In fact, we have confirmation in the chat that it's 24% in the States.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So they're playing the soju game in California, which is why
it really is. It's super light, and I think you can just sip it neat. Although if you I've never tried it with bubbles. Maybe with some carbonation and over ice, it could be a nice easy spritzer for the afternoon.
Drink well that way. So that may be
so try that out and let us know what you think. So it's just one of those underserved subcategories of the Japanese spirits industry that needs a lot more attention, a lot more love, and we're gonna do our part. We promise. In fact, we probably are due for another Aomori episode soon. So let's think about that.
Yeah, on the podcast, I mean.
Well, and here, focus on them here too.
Good call. Yeah, there is reason for optimism. I do know that the Japanese government is very focused on Aomori right now. There's been some contracts given to some of the PR groups and that sort of thing. And in fact, I had a meeting when I was in DC with the embassy staff about potential Aomori events coming up either in the late, like probably early winter or springtime next year. So I think there will be more Aomori and Aomori content coming soon.
Yep.
Nice, newly opened.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I'm going for bottle kills here. I'm just trying to make space. So, and that thing is very, very sippable. So it'll be gone very shortly.
I'm doing the same, actually. I had forgotten about my bottle of Nankai Gold, and then rediscovered it when I was cleaning a house, and I was like, oh, that'll be a nice evening sipper.
That's a few nights right there.
Yeah, I tried that actually twice up last night.
Okay. How was it? I bet that sounds good.
Yeah, it was really easy drinking. It's a 43%, so it brings it down to 20, 21.5.
21.5.
Yeah, if I did a perfect 50-50. It was nice. I think I still prefer it on the rocks, but each drink expresses differently with different service styles. So
Absolutely.
yeah, cool.
All right. Sweet. Okay, good. So is that are you good? I'm good.
I am. I'm happy. This is a good episode. Short and sweet. 40 minutes seems like a good.
40 minutes is like, yeah, we're being very merciful if we keep it to 40. And thank you everybody, as usual, for joining us here at the year one. Hopefully we'll get some copycats soon. Other people talking about Japanese spirits in a lot more detail in the coming years. But your conduit for nerdy info about Aomori and Shochu and other things made with koji that happen to be distilled. And we'll be back for episode 71 next week, same time, same place. Until then, to all of you out there, from both of us here, it's Stephen in Fukuoka and me in Tokyo, a very hearty and heartfelt kanpai.
Kanpai. Welcome back to Japan, Christopher.
You too.